All right, at this time, we will call to order the City of Kenai Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for January 25th, 2023. Will you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item A2, roll call, please.
Chair Twait.
Here.
Vice Chair Halstead is absent. Commissioner Fikes.
Here.
Commissioner Woodard.
Here.
Commissioner Greenberg.
Here.
Commissioner Costin.
Here.
Commissioner Glendenning.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Item A3, agenda approval. Wishes of the commission. Commissioner Greenberg.
I move to approve the agenda as written
A second.
with the inclusion of the laydown.
All right, and lay down is add to item F2. And there's several comments in there from different people in there, but that is for item F2. Any objections? Seeing none, oh, I think we did we? Okay,
Second.
second, all right. All right, any objections? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Item A4, consent agenda. Commissioner Greenberg,
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
any objections? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. Item C, scheduled public comment, we have none. Item D, unscheduled public comment. Anyone wishing to come forward to speak to an item not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we will move on. We have no consideration of plats under item E, so F, we have, I believe, 2 items under there. So F1 is Resolution PZ 2023-01, a request by Joe Rizzo for a conditional use permit to allow a performing arts center on the eastern portion of the property described as Tract 4A of Barron Park 2020 replat, located at 450 Marathon Road in the light industrial zone. Can I get a motion, please? Commissioner Fikes?
Through the chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution PZ 2023-01.
A second.
I'll second.
All right, staff report.
Thank you, Chair Twait and Commissioners and member of the public. Before you is a conditional use permit requesting for a performing arts center located at 450 Marathon Road. There you go. There you go. So it is zone light industrial, and the land use designation is industrial. Current use right now is vacant. I want to make it very clear that while the parcel itself is 5.844 acres, this use is being proposed on the eastern portion, approximately 2 acres, and surrounding uses are city facilities, to the north, to the south, the public park, and a dog park in current under construction, and to the west it's vacant, and to the east you have the city facility as well. So what the applicant is requesting is a performing arts center with an approximate audience of up to 150 people, and the plan would be to construct a 2-story building with an approximate gross floor area of 7,726 square feet. Overall building is a modern design with multiple asymmetrical single plane roof, and I apologize that I don't have the plans on the slides, but it is in the packet. The exterior materials will consist of a pre-finished metal siding, composite panels, aluminum windows, and a standing seam metal roof. Approximate number of parking provided is 63, where a minimum of 40 is required by the ordinance, and a single driveway access will be provided along the east property line. And I just want to provide some background that council did enact an ordinance to conditionally donate this 2-acre parcel for a performing arts center with stipulations that has been extended for the completion of the improvement, and that entails a preliminary plat to subdivide it to a 2-acre parcel. And so for the approval of a conditional use permit, there are 6 criteria that must be met. as stipulated in your in the staff report, it outlines in detail how it meets these criteria. And this is just a very quick general overview that these conditions are met and outlined. It is consistent with the purpose of this chapter of the light industrial zone, as this is in the land use table a conditional use, and this is why it's before you. Staff does not anticipate that this will significantly impair on economic or non-economic value to the adjoining properties, and it is in harmony with the comprehensive plan, particularly that the surrounding uses are recreational uses and surrounding uses are commercial. And public service are available for this, and furthermore, for condition 5, the proposed use will not be harmful to the public safety, as this lot is proposed only one access road, further minimizing the potential oncoming traffic. And so at this point, in staff's report, all 6 criteria are met, and staff recommends that your commission adopt this resolution PZ 2023-01, approving this conditional use for a performing arts center, subject to the listed conditions in the resolution. This concludes staff's report, and the applicant is here if you have any questions for me.
All right, thank you. At this time, Mr. Rizzo, if you'd like to come up and give us the 30,000-foot level all the way down to as low as you want to go.
Okay, well, I mean, as far as this conditional use permit goes, of course, it's going to be a requirement for us to put the building up there. Where we are essentially with this project is we've raised about $800,000 from corporations and small foundations and local folks here in our community. And then we have a $1 million grant from the Rasmussen Foundation, which is secured. And we've been awarded another $1 million grant through USDA and Rural Development through a congressionally directed spending through Senator Murkowski's office. So we're working with USDA right now to secure those funds and get all the reams of paperwork that have to be done to do that. And we're working as a team. We have architects with K&A Design Studios is with us on this project, and the Rasmussen has extended their paying of John Conway, who is a very experienced project manager that is part of this. It's my understanding that the survey to subdivide this property has been ordered and is scheduled at some point, and Triumvirate, of course, is going to be paying for that. So that's kind of the update. We're pretty excited that we've gotten this far. So if anybody has any questions that I can answer, I'd be glad to.
All right, anyone have any questions? Commissioner Glendenning.
Yeah, yeah, I can see from your comments that maybe you understated the support of the community for your project.
Yeah,
Okay.
probably.
Yeah, by quite a bit. And I would just like to say congratulations on your vision, forethought, and perseverance, and your focus, and thank you for selecting us to have your project. Of course, the city did donate the land, but perhaps expense-wise, that's the smallest portion of it. You still have quite a few hurdles to overcome, but I can see you will be successful. And again, thank you.
Yeah, and like me, I think you may be underselling like the importance of the city donating that land. That played a big part in getting the Rasmussen grant the Rasmussen Foundation on board, and also, of course, for this congressionally directed spending. And when a municipality is involved and committed, it makes a big, big difference.
Anyone else? So, on my own curiosity, have you gotten some preliminary cost estimates back yet as far as where you're at with your funding? Are you where you need to be, or are you?
Well, where we are right now is, the original cost estimate was $4.7 million. This will be a design build, and so, in meeting with, you know, our architects, we think that we're gonna be able to get that price down, smaller than that. We're at $2.8 million right now, and we still have $500,000 pending with the Murdoch Trust, which they're supposed to make a decision on that on the 23rd of February. And then we have sent in a proposal to be considered for a PRI with the Rasmussen Foundation for financing for it. So we'll have to see like how all those things fall into place. But even right now with the money we have, and we can certainly build something. We're hoping that all those two things fall into place. Because if they do, we shouldn't have any problem having enough space so that it can serve the public.
Great. All right, anyone else? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Twain.
All right, anyone else wishing to testify to PZ 2023-01? All right, seeing none, we will close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission for discussion. Any discussion? Commissioner Glendenning has that look.
Well, yeah, it's again, as I stated in my opening comments, this is something that the community is totally behind, and we can see that you have a quality project here, and you've been very faithful in coming and explaining where you are with your project, with the situation, the triumph you've had, the hurdles yet to overcome, and I know you granted yourself a generous timeline, and I think it's realistic, and so someday front row center, and I'll be there. Thank you.
I expected you'd be in the play somehow. All right, anyone else have any comments? Commissioner Greenberg.
I think this is a great addition to the community, and thank you for all your work on this.
Anyone else? I'll just chime in that it was kind of nice to see this from the very beginning stages when the whole process of donating the land came up and to where it's at now, and it seems like the momentum you have is going great guns in the right direction. So it'll be great to see it performing, that's for sure. So, so I'll be a yes vote for sure on that. And if anyone else doesn't have any comments, we will go ahead and Commissioner Fikes.
I'd just like to share some similar comments. I think it was a very well thought out, very well planned and executed from all parties involved. And I think, like you say, it'll be a great contribution and an asset for the city. We're lucky to have that. So thank you for choosing us.
All right. Doesn't look like anyone else is, so we are ready to call the vote, please.
Commissioner Fikes?
Yes.
Commissioner Woodard?
Yes.
Commissioner Greenberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Costin?
Yes.
Commissioner Glendenning?
Yes.
Chair Twait?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, and that has a 15-day appeal period. If no one files an appeal in that 15 days, then your conditional use permit will be granted. Thank you very much. Move on to item F2 for action approval, recommending the City of Kenai City Council enact ordinance number 3332-2023, amending Kenai Municipal Code Section 3.10.070, livestock within the city limits to allow a maximum of 12 chicken hens to be kept on certain lots less than 40,000 square feet within the city of Kenai. Can I get a motion, please? Commissioner Fikes.
Through the chair, I'd like to approve the action approval for recommending of the ordinance for 3332-2023.
Second.
Second. All right. Staff report.
So this ordinance was a council-sponsored ordinance, and in this ordinance is an amendment to the livestock within the city limits to allow a maximum of 12 chicken hens to be kept on certain lots less than 40,000 square feet within the city of Kenai. First, I want to explain what the current ordinance is. Under the current ordinance as it stands, lots 40,000 square feet or greater and outside the prohibited zones are allowed to have the livestocks, and those animals are identified in the definition of a livestock, which includes chickens. It doesn't differentiate roosters or chicken hens. So as it stands today, those with parcels 40,000 square feet or greater outside of the prohibited zones are allowed to have livestocks. So with this amendment or this ordinance, it is addressing the lots that are less than 40,000 square feet to allow only chicken hens, not roosters, on lots that are let me rephrase that because I don't want to confuse anyone. So the prohibited zone will stand as it is. The four zones are RU, urban residential, RS1, suburban residential 1, and RS2, suburban residential 2, and the TSH, which is your town site historic district, are the zones that are prohibited. So with this ordinance, lots under 40,000 would be allowed up to 12 chicken hens. So with that being said, that's what's being proposed. And a new section is outlined to address setbacks when it comes to coops and it comes to enclosures. It is in the draft amendment. I can address those technical questions if you have it. Without further ado, that's the overall proposed amendment.
All right, at this time, we'll have the sponsor come up and give us his thoughts and vision.
Alex Dothit, Leeward Drive, Kenai, Alaska. City Council sponsored this ordinance. I'm not exactly sure how detailed I can go into this, but basically I can give a really general idea. This came about well before the current egg shortage news came about. I started working on this right after I got on council. It was a ordinance that I feel is just allows food security for people to build in a rural community, to be able to have a few chickens, to have eggs and a food source, give us our independence from the grocery stores, and that's where this came about. And it just happens to fall in with this. Now we have a nationwide egg shortage. The price of eggs are up really high, so I don't want to think that that's where this spurred from, but it definitely plays into the reason, one of the main reasons I was thinking about when I started this. It's mostly just food independence. We are in a rural community. I looked around at several other communities around Alaska that are, I think, way less rural than us, and a lot of them are starting to, even nationwide, are starting to allow chickens in smaller communities and smaller lot sizes. I encourage the commission, if you haven't, do your research, but and look into this. But Anchorage allows it, Fairbanks allows it, Palmer, Wasilla both allow it, Juneau allows it, Seattle even allows it, New York City, LA. It's if you look into it, it's becoming a more and more popular thing to have. And this is a limited number of chickens. We're not talking hundreds of chickens. 12 chickens in a small enclosure are why I wrote this ordinance, is just to allow a small enclosures up to 12 chickens. That's enough for a reasonably sized family to be able to keep themselves in chicken eggs, and that's where I came from. I'll be the first to say, before I got involved with city government, there was 2 years that I had chickens in the city. I didn't know that was illegal. We had 12 chickens and nobody ever knew it. There's a lot of chicken coops in the city right now that were complaint driven, and if people don't complain about them, we don't know about them. And I think this will help address those people to be able to come out and say, hey, we have chickens and we like it. So I'm hoping that's the general idea. I don't know how detailed I can go into this, but that's where I wrote the ordinance, just a food security. We all put fish in the freezer, we put meat in the freezer, we have gardens in our yards. this is just one more of those things that I felt important that is fairly simple, small change that I think will make a big difference in the city. So,
Any questions? Commissioner Glendenning?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Twait. Yeah, I have just a question about I guess the theme and theory of how the chickens are to be monitored. In the ordinance, is there a provision for animal control to look in and make sure that the creatures are being kept in a humane sanitary condition?
and I can refer that back to staff, but it goes back to all of our, and I guess I'll go back to our planning director on that, but yes.
So Commissioner Glendenning, thank you for that question. Yes, so I do want to point out that this amendment is in Title III, which is animal control. And if you look at the proposed Section 8, subsection 8, the keeping of chicken hens must be consistent with the terms of this title, meaning Title III of Animal Control, and does not enter of itself constitute a nuisance or a disturbance, in which case, in terms of sanitary conditions, that would be animal control's purview.
Just another question. Just as a practical matter for siting a chicken location, I live in Woodland subdivision, and we have small lots, and I look at the sizing for siting the chickens, and as a practical matter, I probably, except for just a little bit, I couldn't fit one in my lot, and I think maybe that's self-nominating for those who would say it would be crowded, it would be inconvenient, it would impinge on neighbors' rights. And I think the idea that you have the boundaries and the offsets and the distances defined, not only on the property but amongst neighbors, I think shows that you've put some thought into this ordinance.
And on that note, that's one thing I've heard is, well, can you fit it on a quarter acre? Well, in a lot of areas, it's down to as small lots as 5,000 square feet. They allow certain numbers of hens. If you look at the recommendations, from what I've found, for how much space does 12 hens take up? Do I need 40 acres? Is it a chicken farm? Well, no. 12 laying hens recommended would be about 180 square feet of yard space. So, 10 feet by 18 feet, a few sheets of plywood. If you think about 4 sheets of plywood worth, that's about how much yard space they would actually require to be in a coop contained, 180 square feet. And then the recommendations is about 3 square feet of coop space per hen. So a 6 foot by 6 foot square box, smaller than most sheds. Essentially a 10 by 18, the city allows 10 by 12 sheds without even a permit. So that's the footprint of just the area they would have to have enclosed. You can put a coop inside of that pen and elevate it, so the entire footprint is 180 square feet is what's recommended for 12 chickens. That's not a very big lot space. So on a quarter acre lot, unless you have a giant house that goes right up to your 10-foot setbacks or 5 feet, depending on where you're at on your lot, yeah, I think most people can have a shed. Most people could probably have 12 chickens in a reasonable manner in most of our lot sizes, if you go off what's recommended for sizing for coop space and how much yard space they need to have enclosed. And it has setbacks. So yeah, if for some reason you don't have quite the size of lot that it's going to require, then yeah, you wouldn't be able to have it. That's just the rules you'd have to follow.
Anyone else? Commissioner Woodard?
Well, just reiterating what Jim said, we were talking, I have a pretty small house actually in Woodland, and I too, looking at the setbacks and such, don't feel that I could even put anything on my lot. So again, I think it limits a lot of what is, of those that are going to even do that. And they don't have to have a full 12 chickens either, I believe. I think you
it's
can
up
get
to-
by with a few less if you're just doing for personal use.
If you, and that's a true fact. I mean, if you don't need 12 chickens and you only need 6, it's up to 12. That's just a common number of, a lot of flocks have a dozen birds. A lot of people might want less. That's just up to that. And that's up to a 40,000 square foot lot. 40,000 square feet is almost an acre. So somebody wants 12 chickens in a 0.91 lot, they could have 12 chickens in a 0.91 lot. Unlike right now, they can't. If you have a small lot and with your setbacks, you might only be able to fit a 6x6 pen and a small hutch that you buy at Home Depot, then that's fine. That you adjust your size to what you need for your lot size.
Commissioner Greenberg, did you?
Yeah, I had a question. So this would permit chickens on these lots. Did you, rather than a conditional use permit, they're allowed?
Yes, they
Correct.
would not have to come to planning and zoning for every time somebody wants to have chickens. And right now, it's very limited on what they can use that conditional use permit to allow chickens.
Okay.
And I believe it's under an educational use only right now.
Okay, yes. Did you consider that this would be better to do it as just allowed, or to not do the conditional use permit part?
I feel it would be a lot better and simpler for everybody to not allow it. You don't have to have a conditional use permit if you want 3 dogs, 150 pounds apiece in your backyard. So, a few 4-pound chickens to have some eggs. And I don't think that we need to have every single person who wants to have a conditional use permit. I don't feel that's why I didn't write it in, to bog down the city with every person that might want to have a few chickens in their backyard, to allow them to have to come before the board and go before that. If they have conditions and people are having issues with those individuals, they can report it, and animal control can take care of it and make sure it's within the parameters of what they're supposed to have in the rules and regulations.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? All right, well, Commissioner Glendenning.
Yeah, just again, so the way you explained it, it's a permitted use, but yet the animal control people will be aware of it. They'll be able to look in on it should the situation require. But most importantly, it does not allow roosters.
Yes.
This seemed to have, the last time we had the chicken discussion, it centered around the roosters and the noise and the commotion that was involved with that. And so I think this is an improvement upon past practices, and I think you'd be surprised how many people do have a few chickens or more, and this will more or less bring them in out of the cold.
I can contest that I drive around in a very tall truck all day long, all around Kenai, and I guarantee you there is a lot of chicken coops over those 6-foot tall fences that I see that are already going along, and we're on a complaint-based driven, and if they're not having any issues, they're not getting complained about, so animal control doesn't know they're there. And if there's that many that I see already operating in the city and not getting complained about, realistically, most people won't even know you have them unless you had a rooster. And that's where the neighbors start hearing that crowing going on, and that draws your attention. The hens they're just in there doing their thing, making eggs, and usually are pretty quiet most of the time from what I experienced in my personal experience with them.
Commissioner Fikes.
So what's the enforcement mechanism for those that choose to just let them free run in their front yards and defecate and throw trash out for them to eat and everything, and you got trips in and out of it all the time, and you got to worry
I can
about...
refer back to animal control, but I would assume it's the same as if you had your dog running free down the neighborhood, and your dog crapping in the neighbor's yard, and you're letting garbage everywhere, those same kind of things. It's going to fall under the same kind of animal control. Is if you've got animals running free and being a nuisance, it comes under the same regulations that you can't do that. And it specifically says in the ordinance, backyard, it says, where you're supposed to have them, the setbacks and that kind of stuff. So as far as that concerned, it's the same as you have 3 huskies running around free in a neighborhood that are causing a nuisance. If you have a few chickens that are causing a nuisance and they're going to be complaining about it, it would be the same factors that would draw anybody in to complain about them, and have the same factors to be able to have enforcement for them.
So with that, we're lucky enough to have our Chief Animal Control Officer here, so she might be able to enlighten us a little more on that, if you'd like.
Yeah, so just like you mentioned, we do have in our code our UMOT, which is what we're able to, write citations. We do have something for interference of noise, so we can write for if anything gets too loud. We can also deal with if the animals are outside of those structures. We can enforce that, as well as if the structures or pens are not contained in a sanitary and clean manner. We do have code that would allow us to write citations for that as well.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, like I say, I'm not in the Woodland area, but I'm in a neighborhood where the lot sizes are really small, and I've been to multiple locations, and I don't know if they're approved or not, but they're not in pens, they're just free range, and there's just going in and out of the trash, and chicken poop everywhere, and so, yeah, I'm not into adding more to the misery kind of thing. I'm not seeing where this is gonna be a good thing.
All right, so we'll probably bring you back up again. We're checking on the statute of limitations from when you had your chickens before still, too, so
Haven't had 'em
we'll
in a
get
few
back
years.
to you on that one. But okay, we'll let everybody else that wants to testify, and then if there's other questions, we'll have you come back up.
Yep.
All right, thank you. All right, anyone else wishing to testify to, I lost my, oh, it's not, it doesn't have a number, does it? It's just an ordinance, right? Okay. Anyone else wishing to testify to the public hearing that we have before us? Yep, please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Dan Canetta. I live in the Woodland subdivision, Park 4, 708 Alder Court. I'm not opposed to people raising chickens or harvesting fresh eggs, but I'm not supportive of this ordinance, which would allow chickens to be raised in a densely populated neighborhood like the Woodland subdivision. When I bought my house in 1988, I deliberately chose a lot in the residential neighborhood because I didn't want to live next to farm animals, a pack of sled dogs, a gravel pit, or other disruptive nuisances, and I certainly didn't want to live next door to where chickens could be slaughtered. If I wanted to live in an area with less regulations, I could have bought property outside city limits, as there is plenty of lots to pick from. I enjoy the amenities that the city of Kenai has to offer, and I don't want to see the character and integrity of our residential neighborhoods compromised. Again, I'm not opposed to people raising chickens or harvesting fresh eggs, but this ordinance is not a balanced ordinance. This ordinance only considers the will of those who want to raise chickens in a residential area at the expense of all others. Here's some facts and figures to consider, and your planning director can verify these facts and figures. Currently, the city code allows for chickens to be raised on 28% of the city's lots, but if this ordinance passes, then it would allow for chickens to be raised on 96% of the city's lots. This would create a complete imbalance for those who want chickens in their residential neighborhoods and those who don't. Some more facts is the total number of Kenai lots is 4,895. The current number of lots allows to raise chickens currently is 1,384, so that's at 28%. The proposed ordinance would allow an additional 3,307 lots, so an additional 68% would be allowed of lots for raising chickens. The result of the proposed ordinance would allow a total of 4,691, that's at 96%, of the 4,895 for raising chickens. As far as, I think this ordinance could have been balanced a little bit better. I think what I'd like to see, I'd come up with some alternatives for the Planning Commission to consider. In Section 1 of that ordinance, Part B, if we could add the RS zone to that. So in other words, it would read, and again, this is Section 1, Part B, no livestock shall be allowed in the RS, RU, RS1, RS2, or TSH zones. For some reason, the RS was not put in there, but all the other zones were. And there was There's no reason given for that. And similar to Section 1, Part H, if you add the RS zone to the rest of that language, which would read, the keeping of chicken hens on lots less than 40,000 square feet is allowed except in the RS, RU, RS1, RS2, and TSH zone districts. That's one alternative. Another alternative would be to add language that would establish a minimum lot size. Say, for example, 20,000 square feet to raise chickens. Lots that are 20,000 square feet would be large enough to sustain more impactful activities while buffering neighboring properties. Such lots are large enough to provide natural buffers and practical setbacks to protect neighboring properties from impactful activities. I think these alternatives would work. I also looked at my subdivision. Now I'm in Part 4 of Woodland, and I compared that to the Inlet Woods subdivision, Rogers Road subdivision, which is zoned RS1, and that doesn't allow for chickens, but in my subdivision, the lot profile in the neighborhood is, the profile is similar to that subdivision, so I'm wondering why the difference. Why would you not allow it there? But I think I think it should be treated equally. If you have subdivisions that have similar profiles, like the Inlet View subdivisions, Rogers Road, we should treat it the same, not be treated differently. Anyways, I'll wrap it up here. So I'd like to see some of those alternatives, and if no compromise can be made, then I urge the Planning Commission to not support this ordinance. I urge the Planning and Zoning Commission to continue to preserve the character and integrity of our densely populated residential neighborhoods.
All right.
Thank you.
We might have some questions for you. We'll see if anyone has any questions. I have one. With your calculations of the 28%, and all that, did you happen to do any kind of calculations on if we amended it to 20,000 square feet, what that percentage of the land would be?
No, I did ask planning director that question. I don't think I could figure that out as easily as she could.
Okay. And then the follow-up question, I guess, is if it was based on a ratio of how many chickens per lot size, not just in a specific zone, say the RS zone could have 3 or something like that, but it was just on the lot size and it was proportionate to the number of chickens based on the lot size, would that, if the numbers were adequate, I guess, something way less than 12, would that be something that you would be agreeable to, or is it just?
I'd have to look at that, but I would say no. I'm thinking I just don't want to change the character of our neighborhood. I don't want to live next to farm animals. I don't want to live next to sled dogs. I don't want to live next to a gravel pit. And what do we do when there's a shortage of milk? Do we pass another ordinance that says, okay, we're going to allow people to have one milk cow because of food security and we need fresh milk? And then what do we do when we have a pork shortage? Do we pass another ordinance that says, okay, now we're going to allow everyone to have one pig for fresh meat and a food security thing? I'm not buying into those kind of arguments. Anyways.
Okay. All right. Anyone else have any questions? All right. Thank you. Who's next? Yep. Yep. Please come forward, and that little device up there will record you. So if you can, when you get up there, give us your name and address for the record.
My name's Dave Howard, and I live at 703 Poplar Circle. And I had a couple of comments in that. Number one, the terms and conditions of a permit are to protect the neighbors around the permit holder. The situation in my neighborhood was a conditional permit given to a person that rented the house next to me. They had no idea where property lines were. They had no idea of anything, and they proceeded to build a giant chicken coop. When I tried to say, hey, you guys, this is kind of bad, it started a back and forth. And the city is not, they don't have the resources or the manpower to really come out and measure off the lines, verify really anything. It's a case where the permit holder is on their honor to do as their conditions provide. Well, when they don't, you do not get any relief, no matter what anybody here says at all. And I've been 3 years in seeking relief on the 25-foot setback that I was to have between my yard and their facility. Let's say they would have to hire people to enforce the property lines. I know where it is around my house, but most people don't really know. So the whole thing would turn into a Hatfield-McCoy situation, as it's been around my little neighborhood on that end of the street, all over the city. Like Dan says, 96% of the people, and excuse me, ma'am, when you talked about free-ranging chickens over, I've heard about that. And Mr. Dothet talks about the animal control coming out, like you've called about a loose dog. 3 years later, you guys, if you do anything, it would be to enhance and enforce animal control and planning and zoning to just enforce the ordinance as it is. Somebody, that lot is 11,000 square feet next to me. We do know people have little things around back, but this could open up a Pandora's box, and the city doesn't have enough manpower. Thank you for your time. Is there any questions?
Absolutely. Anyone have any questions? Commissioner Greenberg?
So you're opposed to this even as a conditional use permit?
I cannot, let's say I have a real bad taste in my mouth for what kind of went on, inadvertently or not. So I'm against this 179% more, because I know human, and first, well, one friend didn't come tonight because I don't think he could get away. But he said if there's a chicken run across my yard, oh, and actually, you guys, that leads to what happens here. Okay, I got my little pen here. Okay, here comes the neighbor's dog because it's been attracted to this facility. And then you're gonna shoot the neighbor's dog, or you're gonna call animal control, and they show up and they tell you this or that. And next thing you know, the neighbor's telling you, and pretty soon, it just turns into what can occur. And I understand you guys can only recommend to the city council about this ordinance. And I have talked to 4 or 5 of the city council members that were at a Board of Adjustment hearing here last June. So I wouldn't bore you with those details, but if you could read the Board of Adjustment's appeal of this facility next to my house, or get a chance to drive to the end of Walnut, back towards the ravine, turn left at where it hits Poplar, just turn left, and what you see there is, to some people, not such a bad deal, but because it missed all the offsets and backsets and all of that, the people have now moved to North Kenai. They've told the landlord they'll be back in the spring to get this facility. And so for 3 years, I've been trying to get relief from that 7-foot-high fence, blue tarps flopping on the side. It's not right. And I tell you another thing I noticed. I've lived in my little house as long as my neighbor Dan, since '88. And I've seen even, it's the older people like myself that have lived in the subdivision and around who are dead set against this. They're not here all tonight, but it's the younger newcomers. They don't see anything wrong with 2 chickens in the backyard. if you come to the end of Walnut and turn left into my little cul-de-sac, you'll see what could happen. And I won't even have to, I might not be around to hopefully see the results of this, because I will hope that you guys will recommend to just table it. Let's wait 10 years and let's reintroduce something. Thank you for your time.
Any other questions? Commissioner Glendenning's got one. Hold on. You're not gonna sneak away.
Just thank you. Hey, I live on Sycamore Circle, just stone's throw away from your place.
Okay,
So-
you're on Sycamore?
Yeah.
Towards the inlet?
That's
Right.
Right, so-
From my house.
yeah, it's
I never knew.
Close.
I never knew where you lived.
yeah.
I knew you
Now
lived
you
there.
now you now you know. Now you know, but it's okay. So the situation you found yourself in, it's been resolved, and with time and the snow going away, it'll be mostly resolved or totally resolved, right? In other words, the blue tarp and the fence and the auxiliary structures will be gone. The people are gone, the chickens are gone, and most importantly, the roosters are gone. So in essence, you did prevail in your discussion. It may have taken some time. There was forbearance allowed, as I understand it, to the occupants of the property that had the chickens, and it was a compromise that seemed to be agreed to by all. But the way I look at this ordinance here, it wouldn't allow that sort of thing. I mean, by the offsets and the setbacks for this type of activity, much less the number of creatures that would be allowed in your situation. Your point's well taken, and I think perhaps in a way, because of your experience, that's what drove this version of a chicken ordinance. In other words, to improve upon the condition, upon the situation, and point out that still, even though it's a given that you can have, it's still complaint driven, and we do have trained people that can, in the instant, look and evaluate and see if the physical structures are what's allowed, and the condition of the birds. I think you did impact our situation in the town.
Well, excuse me, sir, because they don't have the manpower to enforce or look at anything. And if I had not known where the survey pin was in the ground on my back corner, they wouldn't come out until I could prove that. And when they did come out, you know, you guys, it was this 25-foot setback in between that house and my house. I live along that ravine there. For so long that I realized that the moose can't get along the ravine edge anymore, because all of those people have decks. So they come right down that street, pass between my house and the house next door. When they started to put stakes in the ground, I was kind of misled a little bit on really what their intentions were. So I immediately kind of said, well, you can't do that because the moose, and I've said this to everybody, they pass through here, and if they don't have this avenue, they'll have to come up my driveway and they don't want to come into I got a shed in the back. Well, she had her intentions. So when I talked at the Board of Adjustments, I talked about that avenue, and that all I wanted, all I was after was the 25-foot setback. Mr. Glendenning, you say these setbacks that are in this ordinance, no one's gonna come and pull up a tape. No one is, and even if maybe you think they're not coming. So there was a temporary planning and zoning director at the time. His name is Max Best, and he's a very fine gentleman. I think he's down at the borough. He came out And off of the pen that he located, they went over into the middle of the chicken pen where the fence was supposed to be, made some lines in the middle of it. And then at that moment, they allowed that lady to call that 7-foot-high outlaw fence, let's say, a garden fence, allowed her to leave that fence that's been a knife in my back from day one, and she put a little 4-foot-high chicken wire fence in the middle of that structure, and that's how it sits today. And you say everybody's happy? I'm not happy at all, and I've talked to Linda Mitchell, well, the landlord I know from him owning the house and renting it, and I'm waiting for him to show up, because I told him that fence is not gonna stay up. Well, we understand it's frozen in the ground. Well, maybe I want the tarp off of it. Maybe I'm not happy. So, this ordinance is the worst idea I have heard just because of what I've been through. Now, had nobody moved into that house next door and I knew nothing about anything in the way, I wouldn't even be here talking. But I know this can go on all over this town now. I know people. And the quiet people with their chickens quietly in the backyard are just fine. But even look at the name of this thing. It was a farm. It was an educational period that turned into a farm. That's not what we want in our little subdivision. And they can't enforce these ordinances or the setbacks and things. It's really not worth it. And I promised my wife I would not carry it.
She's probably watching too, isn't she?
Now, I just hope that your recommendations will allow the city council members, because I won't be at that meeting, but they've heard from me about this. So,
All right.
thank you.
Yep, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. If I could ask Mr. Bloom, just so we make sure we're tracking all, pulling in the same direction. So the neighbor that he's speaking of, that was not a conditional use permit, correct? It was granted it because of an educational purpose?
Correct, that's my understanding. They had a exception based on education to allow the chickens to be there.
And the criteria for that, and either of you might know the answer to this, was how many, they were allowed a certain number? Was that part of the deal then too, or was it not?
Yes.
Yeah,
They were allowed a certain number. That's correct.
okay. All right. Okay, anyone else wishing to testify? Yep. Same thing. State your name and address for the record, please.
Barbara Kennedy, 4215 North Lupin Drive, Kenai. And I'm very much for the chicken ordinance. That my subdivision, just like was mentioned, there are chickens everywhere. And I was unaware of how many of my neighbors had chickens until one of them gifted me 3 for my birthday. I had just bought the house, was unprepared, and have since spent thousands on habitat. Because predators think chickens are delicious, you have to protect them. That's part of the deal. People who want chickens, you have to build proper enclosures. Otherwise, you don't have them for very long, and usually after a flock loss, most people don't do it again. Not everybody wants them. Not everybody wants, like, I read some of the comments here of, there could be 60 chickens in my yard, in my block, and I'm like, not everybody's gonna want chickens. They don't. I do. I have 4. And I know some people want to wait longer, but I have a 7-year-old who I'm very adamant about learning about her, where her food comes from, how to take care of animals, the responsibilities, the life cycles. Like, it's important to us that they learn to be connected to where their food comes from. She's 7 now. In 10 years, she'll be 17 and won't want to talk to me anymore. So I don't really want her to miss her opportunity. I don't qualify for the 4-H exemption because she spends her entire summer in Willow with her father. So who takes care of the chickens all summer? while she should be doing 4-H? Mom. However, I have another motivation. I bought the house that I did as far out of town as I could afford to move my mother, who has a traumatic brain injury, into my home and care for her. She struggles, and the number one reason my mom goes outside every day is to tend 4 little chickens named Marigold, Daisy, the Survivor, and Rose. They're our pets. We're not in it for production. We're in it for education, to keep my senior active, and all the heavy lifting is done by me. The construction, the food hauling, like there's some maintenance, I have some help, but it's important that we have these opportunities. People, it's not about everybody's gonna be doing it. There might be a boom. There's always a boom on things. And then it passes. Everybody goes, that was a lot of work. I don't think I really liked it. I don't think we'll do that again. But it may be a fad when the ordinance passes, but I don't think it'll last long. Only people who really love chickens and are dedicated to caring for animals will be in it for the long run. And the news is, they're already there. Those people already have chickens in their backyards. You're just legalizing what's already happening. Questions?
Anyone have any? Commissioner Fikes?
What size lot do you have?
2/10 shy of a half acre, I think. I think it's.
You're,
like
you're
four
probably one of those 20,000 square foot lots, yeah.
And that's just it.
You're greater than, and you're not in a rural residential zoning, or?
I'm pretty sure I'm rural residential, which is why I didn't even check for an ordinance when I was gifted 3 chickens by the neighbor in the subdivision. So now I'm kind of invested in keeping what I have going. Is I'll probably, now reading this ordinance, have to move my coop into a different section of my lot. And I commit to that, is I don't want to give up the number one reason my mother gets out of bed every day to go outside. Because if I didn't have it, she'd quit. She'd stay in the house all the time. It's important to us for her health, her safety. She goes out and shovels to get to the chickens. You tell me how to get a senior to go outside and shovel that they want to.
Anyone else? Well, she did a great job with the Pledge of Allegiance, too, so.
Thank you. Yeah, she every day at school she says.
Absolutely. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I
Go sit.
have a comment.
Oh,
This,
Oh, on the TV.
So this is Ryan Tedford here of 805 Salmon Run Drive.
all right, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay. So, as a previous farmer from the past, part of the Future Farmers of America, and I used to raise chickens and horses and sheep and everything else. And I know how many acres it takes to raise the cow. So my honest comment is, I plan on having chickens this spring. And I don't feel that anybody should be able to be told how many chickens you should own. As long as they're contained in a coop with a chicken coop, you know, as many as the coop is going to hold. I mean, you can have up to 4 chicken coops and 12 chickens for each coop. That's 48 chickens. And honestly, it's for sustainability, especially the way that the prices of eggs is going up. Within the last 5 to 10 years, it's been really super expensive. So I'm thinking this as a sustainability idea, and I think everybody should have the opportunity to raise chickens for themselves, for their family, and friends as well. I think it's a very important idea. As long as the chickens are well maintained and confined in with their coops and chicken runs, I think it's a sustainable idea. I think that's something that is very important to me as a previous farmer in the past, because I came from cattle farming and ranching and pushing sheep and everything else. So I kind of get the idea of what's happening. So, but at the same time, sustainability is very important, especially to Alaska at this point, considering everything's very expensive to ship. And I'm also thinking about like rural areas, like some of the villages that, I mean, the price of eggs in general in the villages are going to get so expensive, they probably won't be able to afford them. So they're probably going to have to raise their own chickens as well. So I don't see, as far as, I mean, I don't think a number in general, as long as they have the amount of chickens that are going to fit the coop, I think is completely fine. As far as their backyard, depending on the size of the yard, I don't think that just based upon if you got a 40,000 square foot lot, I mean, great, you could probably have up to maybe 4 or 5 coops in the back as long as they have their chicken runs and they're well contained and they're not causing, you know, any issues, which normally they won't because they're confined. And quite honestly, I think it's about sustainability, and I think it's great for the community and Alaska in general. And that's the only comment I have. Thank you.
All right, so can I get you to repeat your name and address one more time?
Yes, it's Ryan, 805 Salmon Run Drive, Kenai.
All right, and I'll see if anyone has any questions for you. Commissioner Fikes.
And what size lot are you on in your neighborhood?
I think it's about a .25 lot. It's not a very big lot at all.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. And then I know there's a couple other calls that looks like online too, but I was going to go back to our last person in here. If anyone had any questions for her, or are we good? All right, it looks like we're good. So we will take another one, I believe, online then if we can.
I saw there was someone with their hand raised. It looks like it's been lowered, but if you're on the phone and you want to make a comment at this time, you can press *6 to unmute.
Hello, this is Lisa. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, this is Lisa at 704 Poplar Circle, and I am in support of this for all zones having chickens and lots under 20,000. My current lot is at the 11,000 marker, and some of our topics have been discussed with the chickens that we have on Poplar Circle there in the woodland. That was our meeting that we had last summer, and those were the chickens that have been discussed a lot for the Kenai area. And so I know a lot about what's going on there. And I would like to mention that 12 hens for this new ordinance is not very much at all. Basically, 12 hens is nothing. I easily had 25 to 30 chickens on an 11,000-foot lot, and there was plenty of room. They were healthy. The lot was clean. Animal control came by. The only time my lot was dirty was during breakup season when there was mud, and that is just like anybody's yard who has dogs or any other pets. So, you know, when it comes to keeping the animals clean and healthy, 12 hens on a small lot is going to be nothing. And when it comes to food security, the state of Alaska knows that more than anybody. Food security is a huge issue with our state only being 4% food secure. 4% is nothing. Those, you know, the airlines stop running, the barges stop running, there's going to be no food in Alaska. And the people who are complaining about hearing some chickens, you know, making their noise, not roosters, there's not going to be crowing, but hens, that's not going to feed them. If there's chicken poop in someone's yard because a chicken got out, they're going to get a citation from animal control, just as if a neighbor's dog got out. And some of the people that are there who have been against this also are complaining about ordinances, and yet they tend to break pet ordinances with their animals being loose. And so I just think that that's kind of funny that they'll complain about their dogs being able to run around wherever they want, but at the same time, not allowing their neighbor to have some chickens. So there's so many factors: food security, the right to be able to have animals, you know, like the other member said, you know, they can have 300+ pound dogs, but someone can't have a few pound hens in their backyard. It's just kind of silly. I can go on probably all night talking about this, but I think a lot of the main points have been mentioned. And again, the majority of people in Kenai already have chickens in their backyard. This is just legalizing it, allowing people to have that option. And yes, there will probably be a boom, but it'll be short-lived. So I think this is a great thing for Kenai, and everyone should be on board.
All right, thank you. We'll see if anyone has any questions for you. It looks like you're clear. Thank you.
Lisa, can I get your last name for the record, please?
Hansen, Hansen.
Thank you.
All right, do we have anyone else online that wants to?
If there's anyone else on Zoom that wants to participate, you can unmute at this time. If you're on the phone and you want to unmute, you can press *6.
All right, we'll move on then. Anyone else in here that would like to testify? I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, but come forward, name and address for the record, please.
Thank you, Chair Twait and Commissioners and Vice Mayor Basin and Planning Director Mitchell. My name is Bob Malloy, and I'm a resident of 513 Ash Avenue in Kenai. I've lived there 38 years, and I don't support the ordinance as written. I'd ask the Commission to consider making a motion to amend their motion to recommend enactment, to recommend that it not be enacted as written, and that it be referred back to the Commission for work sessions. There's a lot of planning and zoning that is involved in the ordinance, and you know there's been previous reiterations, some of which went through a lot of work session process, and you know I just want to supplement the comments that I made in the written memo for laydown. You know, I do agree with Mr. Canetta. There's some issues that have to do with you know, inequity in the zones, and you know the fact that there's other issues you know, that I've listed in my memo, such as it appears that there's nothing in the ordinance that limits containment areas to backyards. So in other words, it could be in the front yard, side yard. There's nothing about setbacks from streams or waterways that is appropriate for waste. You know, as Commissioner Fikes noted, free range within a fence is allowed because enclosed shelters like coops are optional. There's nothing specific in the ordinance about standards for dimensions, materials, and appearance of a containment structure, such as a coop, you know, which is other things that people have complained about earlier, or for protection against bears and other predators. There's nothing in the ordinance itself that I found that required the containment area to be kept clean and sanitary, and or about removal of waste or other issues regarding odor. And you know, there would need to be a lot of discussion about enforcement and resources for enforcement, which is really not a part of this ordinance. So that's why I think that it would be appropriate for you know, the council to you know, postpone action and send this back to the Commission for work session and other public discussion, you know, in that informal format where you could have the actual time to look at a lot of these issues and deal with them, especially lot size. My lot size is about 13,500 square feet, and most of the lots around me are a similar size, and in the configuration of where I'm at, I have lots on either side of me and behind me. so we're all pretty close together. So again, I respectfully ask the commission to consider, amending the motion to recommend enactment to be it not as is, as currently written, and to refer back to you for a work session to consider other issues and language for amendment to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Thank you very much. Anyone else?
This is Lisa Hanson again. I just did have one more thing to mention, if that's all right.
I'll tell you what, if you can hold on, we got somebody else up here right now. We'll wait till after they're done.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'm Christine Schmidt. My address is 513 Ash Avenue. I just want to start out by saying it is not true that a majority of people in Kenai have chickens. So secondly, I want to say that I agree with Dan Canetta's comments about the fact that we bought our home in 1985 in Woodland subdivision, and we have a small lot also, and we chose Woodland at the time because you couldn't have livestock or any of the other nuisances for a small lot subdivision. Our subdivision was built by Colliers at the time. It was for employees of Colliers, and it was a really nice place to live, and still could be if we had, neighbors that were responsible. But unfortunately, in some cases, they're not. And I also want to say that I put a letter and an email in your packet, and so I'm not going to just repeat what I said, but I do want to respond to some of the comments tonight. It's real easy to say, just call animal control if there's some problem, but your regulations are very unclear and vague, and they don't say what a nuisance is or what's a problem. So just to say to call animal control every time you have a problem is just not going to work. What you need are regulations that are specific for this issue, and this ordinance doesn't have them. This ordinance is very vague. The same ordinance also, as I pointed out, 10 years ago failed, 6-0 in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and in the City Council also turned it down. But even so, there were work sessions and there were other meetings where people could discuss some of these problems and come up with amendments. The problem with this ordinance is it just pretty much allows anything, and as Mr. Howard said, it's on the honor system. So yes, there may be setbacks, but it's up to you to honor them, and people just don't. And so what happens, as Dave mentioned, was that so people don't honor the setbacks, and then they come in and they want an exception, and you grant it. So it's, unless there's some kind of enforcement mechanism, unless you get a lot more planning staff or animal control people, this ordinance is just, not going to work. You also need more specific regulations about things like no front yards, personal use only, no sale, no commercial sales, because you know that people are going to be selling the eggs that they have. And also homeowner consent for tenants, because no offense to the people who wrote in, but a lot of the people that wrote comments didn't put their addresses with their comments, and according to the borough, don't own property. So I'm thinking they're renters, and that's fine. But those of us who've made the investment in a home in the city of Kenai, we want to keep our neighborhood clean and good looking, and we don't want to have to see, in our particular case, we have 5 lots around us, so there could be as much as 5 different chicken pens that look like the picture on page 38 of your packet, and that's what we're worried about. So when you say that, and that's okay to have that kind of thing, we don't want our neighborhood to look like that, though. I think, like Dave said, we're not against a couple of chickens, but 12 chickens on every lot in pretty much the entire city with little to no other regulation is just not going to work. And you just need to take this back to the drawing board and start all over again. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Oh, Commissioner Fikes.
So then, it sounds like a motion to table this and turn it into a work session would be something that would be agreeable to you?
Yeah, I think I think you could have a big list of issues that you could address here. Oh, I guess I forgot to say too, why RS zone? Why are we being singled out, but all the other ones don't have?
Yeah, I picked up on that, yes. Yeah, I agree. Thanks.
Anyone else? All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Who's next?
Carol Freese. I live at 609 Maple Drive in Kenai. I believe from the letters included in the commission's packet pointing out concerns, along with testimony and additional letters provided this evening, it is apparent that there are many areas of this ordinance needing further review and consideration. In addition, as pointed out in testimony and additional correspondence provided, there are other areas of the code that could be affected or will be affected if this ordinance passes as proposed. I urge the commission to refer the ordinance back to the council, referencing the points of concern provided through submitted correspondence, commission discussion, and testimony offered this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, I'll go back out to Lisa if she wants to add a couple comments real quick.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I did just want to mention that this meeting and the meeting for the council being held February 1st was brought to the attention to the community members of the Woodland Estate, and they have a Facebook group there. And through that commenting alone, there was 40 different residents who were and approve of this, and not only were they just approving this, they were absolutely ecstatic about the opportunity that their families may be able to have chickens for themselves and provide one source food for their families alone. So that is 40 people in the Woodland subdivision, just on a Facebook group alone, that were ecstatic that this could possibly be passed. I know a lot of them were not aware of this zoning and planning meetings, but tend to be there for the council meeting. So that is just something to think about, that just 40 people in a small area where most of those lot sizes are around 11,000 would be more than happy to have this be approved. And so I feel that I could speak for those who have commented on that page about being able to finally be able to allow to have chickens. Also, a thing about the setback rules, people have dogs all over Kenai, all over Alaska, all over the United States, and there's no setback for dog houses. There's no setback boundaries for fences for dogs in a yard. However, dogs are allowed to be in the backyards where they can jump onto the neighbor's fence, they can bark directly into their yards, and cause, quote, nuisances. Dogs don't feed people. Dogs don't feed the community. They're a pet. Now, chickens can be pets, but chickens also are pets that can provide food for the community if the economy shuts down. So I just want the board to think about that yes, there's being rules for these setbacks to be put in place for coops and for the chickens. But imagine those people who also don't want dogs in their neighborhood or upset about their neighbor's dog. You know, it can go for the same thing. They don't want barking in their window at 2 in the morning from a neighbor who doesn't want to let their dog and let them hang out all night in the cold. So, you know, there's a lot of people that can say, you know, the same thing about noises from other animals. But again, it's just one thing with the ability for our city to be able to feed themselves if things come to an end.
All right.
Yeah,
I'm gonna.
thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anyone who hasn't testified would like to testify? And we have nobody else online? No? All right. Councilman Dothett, would you like to come back up and address anything? Or I'll see if anyone has any questions for you. I don't know. Is that all right? Can we put him on the hot seat, or should we? I'll ask the city attorney. I mean, what's the best way to proceed with this? I mean, I know we don't want him to just testify on necessarily, I don't think, but is there any follow-up questions we can ask him regarding some of the ideas as far as which zones and things like that?
Thank you, Chair Twait. I think if you have questions, it's fair to ask him any questions you might have to make sure you have all the information
Okay.
that you want before you make a decision, but probably he's already had his opportunity to testify.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I guess I'll just start then. I'm curious, there's been some questioning regarding the RS1, RS2 being omitted out of there. What was the rationale behind that, if you can share
The
that?
RS zoning was left in there because that's the majority of the smaller lots that people brought up the attention that wanted to have chickens. If you cut that out, we're pretty much back to the original footprints of where we were at before this even started.
But my question is, the RS1, RS2 were admitted or omitted. What was the reason to not have those in there?
The RS ones, those are the groups that have already chosen a neighborhood, like I'll go with Dolchek area and that area. They chose to be more restrictive. And as a neighborhood, they got together and they chose that they wanted more restrictions in that area. Other neighborhoods can choose that too if they would wish, and that's where the RS1 was left out. Because those are the ones that have already omitted multiple things and they chose to go more restrictive and limit several other things. So the RS is the more broadly open and more available for conditional use permits to be able to be issued more freely.
Okay. All right, anyone else have any questions? Commissioner Greenberg.
How do you feel about some work sessions to tweak the code a little bit, maybe do some edits and maybe get some more public consensus?
I think that they can be good and bad. I think we can make recommendations here on what we see, and we can have recommendations for Forset and then go before the commission. And then those recommendations can be brought before City Council, and we can make amendments before City Council. And there's multiple amendments that already have been presented, and I think we can do it without a work session and come up with a reasonable adjustments if we feel fit during the actual meeting.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Glendenning.
Thank you, Chairman Twait. Yeah, thank you for putting the effort into this. I can see that there is, from public comment that I've heard, that there is a sentiment for approval of the situation you're describing in this ordinance. And I would suggest what was brought up is that there's already technical amendments ready to be made. And I believe from our discussion, city councilors are looking or will be able to look at the discussion and from there discern what their concerns and comments are, and would be able to come up with any appropriate amendments if necessary. Some of the situations outlined in tonight's discussion are situations that have already been resolved and perhaps informed our discussion yet for what we had tonight. I believe that this ordinance provides a path forward for those who desire to have chickens, and I believe that there's a track record and a focus. Track record in the city administration and a focus in animal control that they would be able to zero in on any complaints. I believe there is a sensitivity to this, and so I will be voting for positive resolution of this ordinance and passing it back to the city council. And I think we're off to a good discussion in alleviating and ameliorating the situation that we found ourselves with some of our extra meetings that we had this summer regarding ordinances and the situation we found ourselves in with disputes among neighbors. So with that, I'll close my comments.
All right. Any other questions for Councilmember Dothett? All right. Thank you very much.
Can I just
Yeah,
ask one thing?
Yep.
I know that's been brought up a lot about the staff and understaffing issue, enforcement issues. Would it be something we could ask the staff to comment on those? Would that be something?
It's going to happen, I guarantee
Okay.
you. Yep, yep, absolutely. Okay, appreciate it. All right, one last chance. I think everybody here, other than some administration and council members, are in the audience, so I think we're probably ready to close the public hearing then. And so I'm going to check with everybody. Anybody need 5 minutes, or are we good to trudge onward? Okay, we will for now then. So let's start with our animal control officer and ask about the enforcement side of things, because that's my biggest concern, I think, is it sounds like, if you believe one side of this, that there's a lot of chickens out there already that shouldn't have chickens, and they're being allowed to have them. So if we further empower them and they can have 12, and that 12 turns into 18 because we still don't have time to go check on them and see all that, what's the mechanism, and is it going to put a burden on you?
Well, I mean, right now, just like we talked earlier, we are complaint driven. So until we have a complaint regarding it, it might not be something that we know is happening. We do know there are probably chickens around the city of Kenai, but again, unless, somebody has a rooster or anything like that, there is no enforcement that can be done without us having knowledge of something. So yes, I believe that, with something occurring, there could be some additional complaints, but again, it's all going to be based on, how many people are calling us or how many people work with their neighbors to see if they can, alleviate the problem that way first.
All right, and then a follow-up, I guess, to that. I hate to go back to Mr. Howard's situation, but it sounds like the remedy and the resolve for that one either was way slow in happening or didn't really happen at all, and it's happening only because the people are moving. I mean, if the bleeding stops because the person's dead, that doesn't mean that it was a good thing that the bleeding stopped. So I'm just kind of curious, and maybe Mr. Bloom, you can answer that. I'm just curious. Again, it goes back to the enforcement side of things, and I think people might have some questions as far as our follow-up and on the enforcement side.
Thank you, Chairman Twait. So I will answer this just specific to that situation. So the city followed through with the requirements based on the Board of Adjustments decision. The city went out there, and what was required by the board was to make sure that the chicken coops and containment met the setback requirements, and that was completed by Mr. Best. And I think part of the remedy was to move the chickens inside of the exterior fence, so they put in an additional fence to meet those setback requirements. So it is my understanding that the city certainly met the direction of the Board of Adjustment. I know that there may be some other issues as to whether other structures, the exterior fence, are on city property or not, but that wasn't part of the board's decision. It didn't necessarily involve the chickens, and that's a separate matter that, the city can choose or choose not to address based on, the resources that we have.
All right, thank you. I'll let somebody else go. Commissioner Fikes.
For animal control, are we allowed to have any quail or spruce hens or other aviary species in the city limits, or is this just something that pertains to chickens?
There is a list within our code. I don't have the list pulled up regarding what is considered livestock. Let's see. And so within that, that does limit what you can. So, I mean, swine, there's chickens, turkeys, goose, duck, and so those would all be considered livestock. So those would follow the same current rules that chickens face right now. And that would not be impacted with this update with code.
And Chairman Twait, if I just could expand
Yeah.
on that answer. So livestock are currently allowed within certain zones in the city, as long as the lots are of a certain size. So I just want to make sure that's clear, that people can already keep livestock in the city. This isn't changing that. It's just changing the size of lots that people can keep chickens on.
Yes,
Thank
and
you
that
for
brings me back, let me clarify my question. So we're looking to zero in on people's lot size and acceptance of a certain number of chickens, and I guess so, in reference to some of the folks' testimony, if we go ahead and approve this, where is that gonna lead us down the road, I guess is what I was getting at, is you're gonna allow me to have now 12 chickens, but now I wanna add to my chickens to make them quail. And so you're my neighbor, so am I now pissing you off because I've been allowed to have 12 chickens, but now I want a petition to have 12 quail and possibly a couple ducks in my extraordinary garden? So I guess that's just where I'm going with this, and it's gonna lead me right into, I would like to make a motion to table this, because I think there's a lot of things that really haven't been addressed, and I really think that could be addressed in a work session and/or a land use discussion to take a look at this, because we've had this before us before. And so I'm not opposed to chickens, and like I say, I've heard great testimony from somebody who has 4 of them and takes wonderful care of them. And 4 to me seems reasonable, but 12 does not, and it just seems like that's taking it and opening the door for them. So it's obviously accepted in a certain amount of quantity, but I'm certainly not for opening the door for a whole bunch of agriculture and livestock in our residential city. So in order to address some of the concerns, I'd like to make a motion to
Well,
table this.
I'll tell you what, if I
Commissioner
could get you
Twait,
to
if
back
I
that up. Go ahead.
Could just interject. So council has referred this to the commission to make a recommendation. So this isn't really the commission's ordinance to table or schedule work sessions. The commission could, if they're not in favor of it, the way it's written, make a recommendation to council to not approve this until further work sessions are had or not had. But this has been given to the commission to make a recommendation. It's not technically like a zoning change, so it's not something that code requires the commission to provide advice on. It was given to the commission to request their advice. So I don't think tabling it is the right motion, because that's not what council asked. Council asked for a recommendation up or down. You could condition that recommendation, say, we can't approve it, or we don't approve it without, further work sessions, et cetera. But just a motion to table is not going to be useful to the council at this time. And this isn't like this is an animal control ordinance. It's not a zoning ordinance. It's not affecting Title 14, only Title 3. So I feel you need to make a recommendation one way or another that can be conditioned on holding work sessions, et cetera. But just tabling it isn't doing
any good.
What the council has asked you to do at this time.
Yep, thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you for that clarification.
Commissioner Greenberg.
Yeah, how often do you get chicken-related complaints?
Not very often. I look back through our records, and since 2020, I've had 11 chicken-related animal control calls of any type, 2 of which were people wanting conditional or the educational permits. And then the other, let's see, I had 4 noise complaints, and then 1 resident inquiring about whether or not they could have them, and then another 3 in which we had residents call to complain to say somebody potentially had some, but upon research, they did not, or at least that area didn't.
Thank you. So do you feel like this could be a burden to you through your job, like having lots of chickens, more chickens?
You can take the 5th.
I don't have really an answer to that, because again, I don't know how many there are right now that we don't hear. So, I mean, if I'd like to give people a chance and say that people are generally good. That's my philosophy. And so with that being said, if everybody, followed the rules and everything, we might not get calls. But then, with it now being open, it could be a thing where people are more likely to complain because now it's something that is allowed. Maybe people are scared to complain now because it's not something that is. So, I really don't have an answer to that because I don't know, what the future holds and what's going to happen.
Okay, thank you, but you don't see this as being a problem moving forward, do you?
I don't see it as, again, because it's not going to be a conditional where they're turning in paperwork to have them, it is not going to be something that, again, I'm going to know about every one of them. It's going to be very similar to what it is now, complaint-driven.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Greenberg, if I could just add to that, I think while administration is neutral on this, it's intentional that there's not necessarily a permit required for this. So it's, in that sense, it's not going to be the burden of us going out and approving and doing a site visit to everybody that wants to keep chickens. If their chicken coop is over a certain square footage or has hardwired electricity or plumbing set up, then they would require a building permit and inspection. But it's intentional that it's these people, if people want to keep chickens on an appropriate sized lot, it's not going to require any city action.
Thank you for that.
I have a question, I think, for Mr. Bloom. If a complaint comes in that a neighbor says their chicken coop is in the setback, whose burden is it going to be to have an as-built done at the cost of $800 or we'll say. And so if it's the chicken owner and it's determined they're not in the setback, then do they, I'm just curious because I could see this being what somebody mentioned, a battle between neighbors.
Thank you, Chair Twait. So that is somewhat problematic. Obviously, in some instances, it will be obvious whether it meets the setback requirements or not. If it comes down to a matter of inches, that is somewhat problematic. The city certainly doesn't want to pay to have a surveyor go out there. Currently, it's not clear that the burden is on the property owner, although, if we determined that it was violating a setback requirement, we would, even without a survey, just based on what was apparent to us, probably not a matter of inches, but the property owner could hire their own surveyor to prove us wrong. But, it's certainly not something that the city wants to incur the cost of that every time we go out there.
Right. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? I'm going to ask one more of the animal control officer, and I'll have to apologize to my parents if they see this because I grew up on a farm, so I should know the answer to this. But so if you can have 12 chickens, 12 hens, you buy them, and you already know. So without a rooster, they're not going to make chickens, right? They're little baby chicks. They're just going to be eggs, right? I should know this. I didn't grow up on a chicken farm, so you got to have it's okay. So therefore, in the other example of the education thing where supposedly they got more than the number they were supposed to have, they had roosters, and so that's perpetuated the problem, correct? I should have asked. I knew it. Commissioner Woodard.
I'm just curious, how many hens does a normal family require to have the amount of eggs that they need? Could they get by with 4 chickens?
I know that. The average is 3 chickens per 2 people. Thank you.
No, they don't make it with sorry, this is Ryan here again. So they don't make it with just 4 chickens or 6 chickens. I mean, you can do 12
Hey,
chickens.
I'm gonna have to.
and
I'm gonna have to interrupt you. We're done having any more testimony other than just our deliberation up here. So, you certainly
fair enough.
have comments that'll work next week for sure at the council, though.
All right, thank you.
All right. Can you mute him? All right. We'll see if we got any more discussion. I might want to take a little break here, just maybe 5 minute at ease, and we can go over a couple of things, if that's good with everybody.
And Chair Twait, sorry, before
Go ahead.
you at ease, I just want to make sure I was perfectly clear. The commission is certainly willing to is certainly able to make recommendations, a recommendation with recommended amendments as well. I just want to make sure that I didn't preclude that.
Great. That's kind of what I wanted to chat with, so thank you. Okay, so we are back on the record, and I wanted to first see if we have any more discussions. And like Mr. Bloom stated, we have a couple of options. One, we can just start making amendments or changes that we'd like to see in any of the ordinance and vote on those as an amendment, or, no?
No, it would be either you recommend to enact the ordinance or to not recommend to not enact the ordinance, and you can explain your reasons why. Those are your two options. There are no amendments.
So I agree with Linda. So this commission can't make any amendments, but they could recommend to enact with, amendments. We recommend to enact and would like you to consider these, but
So if we have 6 things we wanted to change, we vote on those individually then, as in, like we would an amendment, or how?
Right. So again, this commission can either recommend to enact or not to enact, but you could recommend to enact and then recommend amendments, but the commission itself can't amend the ordinance.
I should have stayed on that. I had ease a minute longer, maybe. Okay, so hypothetically, somebody wants to change the number of chickens. But somebody else has something else they want to do. How do we put that all into one recommendation then, if somebody might be split on some of those ideas?
Sorry, thank you. Commissioner Twait. So the motion either has to be to enact or, there's not a negative motion, you would, vote it down. But you could vote to enact and recommend certain amendments. But is that clear? So you should go through the amendments that you would like to make, and then at the end of those amendments, then you could vote whether to enact or not. And that recommendation to enact would be forwarded to council with your recommended amendments. But this is not the commission's ordinance, so the commission can't amend, so you can't enact with amendments. You can enact and recommend amendments.
Everybody on the same page with that? Commissioner Woodard.
So does that mean that they could take our yes with or without our recommendations?
Certainly. They don't have to, the council doesn't, if you recommended to enact and you also recommended certain amendments, they could just, they don't have to adopt your amendments. This is council's ordinance, and you are just advising them on what the Planning and Zoning Commission thinks would be best based on, the decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So for example, let me try and help you. So if the commission wanted to reduce it to 6 chickens, hypothetically, you would move that amendment, and then you would move to enact with a recommended amendment that was approved by the body.
Commissioner Greenberg.
What if the commission didn't have any recommendations or amendments, but we did request that there was a work session? Because it seems like there's a lot of real chicken knowledgeable people.
So that could be done 2 ways, depending on the commission's desires. You could vote it down and speak to that decision that you're voting it down because there wasn't a work session. Or you could recommend to enact, but request that there be a work session. Again, council doesn't have to honor that request.
Thank you.
Okay, so do we have any other discussion? And then what I would like to do then is get each commissioner then to, if they want to, give a reason for why they're going to vote the way they are so that we have that on the record, and that will get to the council then. So we'll kind of poll the jury, if we will. So I'll start with down at the end with our illustrious Commissioner Glendenning.
Thank you. And Chair Twait, I hate to interject again,
Yep.
but I just want to make sure that if any individual commissioner has, justifications for why they vote in favor of it or against it, that doesn't necessarily represent the body suggesting,
Correct.
we enact it with any change or we choose not to.
Correct.
Chairman Twait.
Commissioner Glendenning.
Well, just jump in the middle of it. I will be voting to recommend affirmative consideration to the council. Okay. And also note that we have had in-depth discussion and many points were made. Everyone, my estimation, had a valid point. And I am sure that the city council members are watching, or if they're not watching, they will have opportunity to review. And from there, take our comments. I think there is movement to have some type of chicken ordinance. I think there's been many positive suggestions made by all present. But I am of a mind that I'm going to vote for it to be approved by the council, with the strong suggestion and observation that this is an improvement over existing ordinance and provides a path forward for those who wish to have chickens, and if there's who object to the presence of chickens for good reason, that they have a path forward also to appeal through administrative relief. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Woodard.
I'm really torn with this. I want to say both, yes and no, because I agree. I moved into a subdivision to have a nice home without retail or, that type of stuff. But I agree that a chicken can be a pet, and it can also provide food for you. And I would just like to see that there's good regulation on it, and that people pay attention to the setbacks and that type of thing. And I think that would limit a lot of it. So I'm still qualming over which way I'm going to go, but those are my reasons.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Costin.
I thought about this for a bit, and really, I would have to say I would vote no, based on the way the ordinance is written. I think it needs more work, I really do. I think we need more clarification in the ordinance.
Very good. Commissioner Greenberg.
Yeah, I live on a third of an acre lot, and I don't see why I can't have chickens. And I think this ordinance kind of brings forward some relief to a lot of people who do have chickens. So, but that's not saying it wouldn't benefit from a work session or some clarification of maybe some of the discrepancies between the zones. It doesn't sound like chickens are a big issue in the city by complaints. I would be in favor of this. It doesn't mean it can't be refined through a work session or additional comment.
Commissioner Fikes.
Yeah, I can see both sides of it. I too agree with having chickens and having the ability to have them either as pets or as a food source. But as it's written, I would not be in favor of recommending it to the council. I would like to see some more work done either through a work session or some more input and some more time to spend on it to see where the enforcement's going to come from. I just don't see the teeth in this ordinance, and so for that, I just don't agree with opening the door for a recommendation to the ordinance. So for that reason, I'm going to say no.
Okay, and I guess I'll go ahead and take a stab at it too. I agree with what most have said, I don't necessarily think that we want to say no and leave it as a negative recommendation, because I think there's a lot of valid points that can be made to have some. I question that an ordinance change that's going to affect 96% of the property in the city is certainly not, and it's not time sensitive to rush it through right now without having a little bit of time on it. Again, I don't know that we'll change a lot from where we're at right now, but I think there's some questions we have. I know I could have possibly made a few amendments and looked at it a little closer and moved it ahead if we had to, with the hope that council will then fine tune it the rest of the way. But I don't see any reason why we have to cross our fingers and send it forward and hope that they do that when we could just throw a work session. And I would strongly recommend that we fit that in as soon as possible so that we can move forward with it and get it behind us. I do worry a little bit about, the disputes between neighbors where the surveys are going to come into play, and if it's, if it's a 1.5 feet on there, do we say, okay, we'll give you that variance, or it can be done, or there's a lot of things I think that we have the ability to take the time to look at and flesh out before it becomes a problem, and then we have to try to backtrack a little bit. So I will be not in favor of recommending this approval based on the fact that I think we need to work on it a little bit more and with the hopes that they'll send it back to us. Commissioner Glendenning.
Yeah, so if I listened right, is that individuals, through expressing their opinion and their observation of the discussion and their interpretation of the ordinance as written, is that there would be recommendation for approval by a council with the application of discussion from a work session. Is that what I'm hearing? In other words, it would be an affirmative that we want you to consider it in a positive way with the bolt-on of a work session to discuss the outstanding issues and ferret out all the problems that we have begun to reveal. Is that what you're?
I was waiting to try to have what came first, the chicken or the egg, all night long. So I think that is, I don't know, or a negative one. So maybe again, Mr. Bloom.
We're talking about chickens, so
I think the
go for it.
point is going to get made to him whether we vote it affirmatively but want a work session, or if we vote negatively and want a work session. I think we're going to arrive at the same place, are we not?
Excuse me, I swallowed wrong. I apologize for the distraction. I'm not 100% sure I can answer that. I mean, you can either vote in favor of it or vote it down. If you vote it down, you can explain your reasons, because I'm not clear whether it's this commission that wants to have a work session or the commission wants the council to have a work session. So that, the council is certainly under no obligation to refer this back to you. Thank you, JJ.
Correct. And I think what I said was hopefully they will refer it back to us for a work session. I think, like the lady that testified that said there was 40 people in Woodland that are for it, but didn't have time to come to this. I would love to see 40 people come to a work session and give us their opinion on it. I know you're shaking your heads, but if they're there, then let's hear them. I think that's, let's see if they really are there. Commissioner Woodard.
Just commenting on the Woodland thing, since I live in Woodland, I didn't get the impression that 40 people wanted to have chickens. Most what I read was that people had no problem with the chickens that were there, and maybe some wouldn't mind having some, but I didn't get the opinion that 40 people wanted them.
One quick sec. Planning Director Mitchell, go ahead.
So So before we go on the route of making a motion of requesting for a work session, is there anything, you know, you have mentioned some clarification? You know, some of the things that were mentioned, I did not provide clarification because I'm assuming either you know the ordinance, but if you have those issues of clarification, I want you to, if you want to ask me, I'm happy to answer them. So what are you hoping to get out of this work session? You know, besides, I'll address one thing, commercial. If you're telling me someone wants to do a commercial farming and raise chickens in a residential zone, that's not going to happen. As Mr. Molloy has stated in the land use table, general farm or agriculture is a prohibited use. So in a residential zone, in order to have these 12 chickens, you need to have a principal use. So the principal use itself cannot be a commercial farming. You can have a house, and this was an incidental, and if you start selling out of it, you're being out of compliance with the home occupation, because home occupation allows you to have a certain uses, incidental or secondary, to a residential use. So if you're telling me someone's have 12 chickens and they're starting to have people show up their house and start selling it, they're in violation of the zoning ordinance. The intent of this is for personal use. And so while it's not explicit in this ordinance, it's explicit in the rest of Title 14. And so, you know, I want to be clear on that while it's not explicit in this, if someone was to come to me in the Woodlands with a vacant lot and just started operating 12 chickens by itself with no structure, that's in violation of the zoning ordinance. So I want to address that commercial operation of a chicken hen farm up to 12 would not be would be allowed use on a vacant lot in a residential zone. So in the concerns of a commercial operation, that is the case. If there are any clarification that I can provide from how the ordinance and the existing ordinance when it comes to zoning, please, I would like to answer it now if it could be answered here versus a work session. So if your commission have any questions for me.
So I'll bring up one that it was talked about a little bit when we were on our break. It was stated that the containment needs to be in the back, but containment, I guess, is the definition that I'm curious about, because if they fence in their front yard, the chickens have free run to wander into the front yard up to that fence line. So they're not going to be restricted to just the back of the house. You could drive down the road and see them in the front yard. Is that true or not true?
If we're talking about, sorry, thank you, Chair Twait. So if we're talking about containment structures such as fences, corrals, yes, the way the ordinance is written is 25 feet from the front yard. So this would be a recommended change that your commission could suggest that it be restricted strictly in the backyard. Make it simple, meaning when we say backyard, from a zoning and planning perspective, it's from the rear of the building facade. That would be where it would be limited to. The ordinance, how it's written right now, containment structures such as fences may be up to 25 feet from the front yard.
Okay. Commissioner Glendenning.
Yeah, a question. Is the number of chickens scalable? In other words, we're locked in on the number 12, and some have suggested 4 or 3, or a ratio of producing chickens according to the season to the number of people in the household, which gets a little complicated. Is the number 12 too high? Could we say 9? What's the negotiation point? What's the breakover where we can get everybody to say yes? And recommend in a positive way that the council take it up. And they're going to have their own viewpoint. They're going to have their own amendments. They're going to have their own discussion. Trust me on that. Is there a number other than 12?
Good question. Let's see if anyone has that as a concern. I'm more of a beef guy. So anyone, I guess I'll just ask, is anyone have would this be able to move forward if it was less?
So Chairman Twait?
Yes, sir.
Just before you ask that question, Linda and I had this discussion today, and I think she provided me a great answer that at least put some framework, not necessarily a number of chickens, but you know, Commissioner Glendenning mentioned based on the size of the family, I think that would be difficult to enforce. We don't want to know how many people are living in a house necessarily or how they're related. But I think Ms. Mitchell at least can provide some comments from a professional planning perspective as to what parameters might be put on the numbers.
Great. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Twait, and thank you, Mr. Bloom. So I think the best way to look at this is the zoning, right? Where these areas are typically, are they in the rural residential? Are they in the urban core? And the density, and typically the zoning kind of dictates that. So in the RS zone, and why some of the questions were why was it excluded, is when you look at the land use table, RS allows a lot of uses subject to a conditional use. RS1 and RS2 is very restrictive. It's very clear that that particular two zones are residential character for the most part. So for me, you're asking a number. You can make that recommendation, but I want you to look at the zone, rural residential, and usually where are these lots located? If you look just across the way, everything in green is rural residential in your zoning. Most of those are surrounded by lots typically greater than 40. So their neighbors already probably have chickens. I find it probably more appropriate to have up to 12 in the RR just because of where it's located in the city, in the zone. When you start getting to the core of the city, in the downtown, the airport, these are smaller lots, and you have to ask yourself what uses are allowed. Are they having more adverse impact that chickens would have if you had a tow yard next door or if you have business that delivers day in and day out? So what I would suggest is you could recommend reducing it down to certain residential zones to a lower number and allowing up to 12 in rural, because those residential zones are already probably larger, surrounded by larger lot, or that already have chickens around. And the intent is it's rural. It's identified for that, and it functions like that in where it's laid out on the zoning map. So that is kind of where I stand.
Thank you. And I would agree with that. I would have no problem if this came to us as just rural residential zone. I think that would be more than appropriate then. But I do have questions regarding, I don't know that Woodland or Inlet Woods looks much different than Inlet View over there. They look the same to me. And so separating the two out seems a little subjective, and I don't really understand. And I know if we take out the RS zone, that's a big chunk of the population that we're looking at. So I understand people, we have a lot of non-compliance then right off the get-go, it sounds like. So, but I do think that's worthy of a discussion. I don't, maybe we change the number in some of these other zones. Commissioner Glendenning is looking at me again.
Yeah, I'm just, you know, I hear people say I would vote yes, but for. Yes, I would vote yes, but for, and everybody has a different but for. And I don't know, in what's left of our meeting tonight, I don't know how we get there. Okay, unless we entertain individual amendments from those that I would say I would vote it for this but for, and then put their but for up as an amendment or a suggestion to the council in the discussion. It'd be improvident to have a sentiment towards, yeah, we want to approve it in a positive way and turn it down because we can't articulate our thoughts. I'm for it the way it is. I'm just trying to find a path forward for the rest of us to express ourselves.
You would wish to not change it at all. You are good as it is.
I would pass it on to the city council, knowing them as I do. There will be changes made. There's already technical amendments that have to be made.
Okay, so I'm going to ask again, if anyone has any desire to change anything, to make any amendments, or if we want to go ahead and vote on this as it is. I've seen nobody. Commissioner Costin.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify. So if I were to vote yes, but I still would like the city council to reconsider amendment, that's an acceptable process, right?
So they're going to consider any amendments on their own
Okay.
regardless. You wouldn't even have to state that, I don't
right.
think.
Well, if it's a amendment that the Planning and Zoning Commission wishes to recommend to the council, a motion would need to be made, and then the commission would need to vote on that amendment. Then the main motion would be to, if that amendment passed, then the main motion would be to recommend that council approve with the recommended amendment that was voted on by the commission.
Okay, so that's back to where I was at before. So we're layering several potential proposed amendments then.
Well, right now, there is no amendment on the
Correct.
floor.
But if there was, we would vote on a proposed amendment, vote it up or down. Somebody else would have the opportunity, and we would continue to, then we would vote on the main recommendation as amended, just like we normally would.
Right, so the
Proposed amended.
So assuming, say, Amendment A and B passed, then the final vote would be to recommend that council approve with the following amendments.
Proposed amendments.
Proposed amendments, correct.
Okay. I'm not supposed to make motions, so.
Yeah.
So. Take another 5 minutes. All right, I'll tell you what, I hate to do it, we're gonna take another 5 minutes just to make sure we are doing what we wanna do here.
actually, Mom is washing her hair right now. She had 100-year-old, 100 days of school, and then like, those things are a bunch of powder. And she's like, can you just do the night, because I was gonna have to be there. Thank you.
So the borough makes, instead of saying in or seeing for in, they would just that's what happened in 1988. So originally, guidelines would have been ends.
It would be great if they
done and everything. They just did. Yeah. You know, say.
But that's why we should be.
They just literally. Yeah.
Well, so right now they shouldn't have roosters at all. If you look at
This is what type of your animal practically it doesn't fit the zone. It's like as an end for the virus wait, I don't think you ever see business over they get too fancy. But people just do what they want to do. And it's, there's this person that's just eggs for sale.
40,000 square foot
That's
lot.
a commercial business. This
No,
could
no, I think it's
sure.
not.
10, 14 says you need it. And then they used to order it to be.
40,000.
It doesn't say it's for
But that's what I'm saying, is that
person
there's
use. It doesn't say it's
Over 40,000.
I have 40, I have a big lot, I have 12 chickens. They're in a pen, big pen, and they have a house. I don't think they realize that a chicken is 150 pounds. You have to take care of that because of a steak. And just imagine different than what we said. And last year we got a rooster and like 10 chickens. And one neighbor said, "Oh, hear the rooster in the morning." But he went to the freezer. I'm on almost an acre. Yeah, see, but we had 2 dogs that came in, breached our fence. Frenzy took out all the chickens, and our neighbor came and paid for it. I didn't demand they kill the dog. It was like, this is nature, this is, you know, this is what they're gonna do. But just down the street from me, there's a guy's got 6 chickens, and he allows them to free range, and then he tells the neighbor, who I know, if your dog kills my chicken, you're gonna pay thousands of dollars. He says, if that damn chicken's in my yard, I'm gonna let the dog out.
Well,
You know, it's
but they can't.
you know, so we're going to have this feud thing over, but we've never had it. The rooster, we took out the rooster, and we could technically have them. But it's the ones, this is what shows now. Our neighborhoods have like 3 pictures now. And all the food. This lady, she's just talking about, not the property owner, the renters. Well, and she's the one that helped the chickens that are supposed to be 6. Yeah, well, she was supposed to have 6 for her education project. She lost 3. The area that my chickens are in, they've got a big area, and it's all bare, because they eat it. Right. You know, and so I wanna see them in the backyard, I wanna see them in a pen, you have to have a structure. We're not the science structure. That's the thing, that was something I pointed out. You know, so some people are gonna think it's more close to the purple. We call them chickens. They all run there.
There we go.
So you must have more than 10 years. Get your children.
Okay, we are back on the record, and Commissioner Greenberg.
I move to recommend that council approve with, do I need to read the
Yeah, those two,
PZ?
yeah.
Okay,
if you
what,
could.
it was,
It's not, ordinance 3332-2023.
was it 3332 dash, sorry, I don't have that open.
2023.
Dash 2023, with the following recommended changes. One is to hold a P and Z or council work session, and then two is that containment of the chickens be restricted to the back of the house.
A second.
Got a second. Discussion.
So Commissioner
Oh.
Twait, sorry.
Yes, sir.
I hate to complicate it, but I just recommend that you vote on each proposed amendment separately.
One at a time? Okay. All right, so we will take the first one, which was that either P and Z or council hold a work session.
And/or.
Yep, and do we have the same second? We're good with that?
Second that.
Okay, any discussion on that? We're good? Okay, please call the roll.
Commissioner Greenberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Costin,
Yes.
Commissioner Glendenning,
Yes.
Chair Tweet,
Yes.
Commissioner Fikes,
Yes.
Commissioner Woodard,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right, Commissioner Greenberg.
Okay, the second amendment is containment of the chickens would be to the back of the house.
And a second.
Second.
Second. All right, any discussion? Commissioner Glendenning.
Yeah, the back of the house would be the back facade, the back wall would define it. You're just like looking at a goal line in a football field.
I
That would-
believe so. Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair Twait and Commissioner Glendenning. Correct. If you're going to use rear, for us in zoning planning, the term would be the rear yard, and that would be the rear building facade, everything behind that. So straight line across, anything behind that.
Thank you. Yes.
Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll vote on the amendment.
Commissioner Glendenning,
Yes.
Chair Tweet,
Yes.
Commissioner Fikes,
Yes.
Commissioner Woodard,
Yes.
Commissioner Greenberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Costin,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right, any other amendments? Or we're going to vote on the main motion as amended? And I think that's what we're gonna do.
Commissioner Costin,
Yes.
Commissioner Glendenning,
Yes.
Chair Tweet,
Yes.
Commissioner Fikes,
Yes.
Commissioner Woodard,
Yes.
Commissioner Greenberg,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right, thank you. Thank you for bearing with us out there. It's a little more complicated than it usually is. We now are on to item G, unfinished business. We have none. Item H, new business. We have one item tonight for action approval. It's a time extension for compliance with the conditional use permit conditions in Resolution PZ 2021-38. A motion, please. Commissioner Glendenning.
Okay, I will read from Director Mitchell's memorandum and move that the commission approve a one-year time extension for Resolution PZ 2021-38.
Second.
Second. All right, staff report.
Thank you, Chair Tway and Commissioners and members of the public. So before you is a time extension for a conditional use permit. This was approved in November 10th, 2021 for a recreational vehicle park. And typically Title 14, when a conditional use permit is approved, it has 1 year to establish the operation, otherwise it lapses. So before you, because of Time constraint, the applicant was not able to properly pave for the RV parks, so therefore they are not ready, and with the winter season, they cannot start again until the spring. So they're asking for additional time to do the remaining paving in order to operate and be in compliance with the conditions listed in the resolution PZ 2021-38. Therefore, staff is asking if your commission approve a 1-year time extension for the resolution. That concludes staff's presentation.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Glendenning.
Okay, thank you for the report. So, in your opinion, they've made a good faith effort so far. It's just conditions have caught up with them and they need more time to fulfill their part of the bargain. Is that correct?
Thank you, Commissioner Glendenning. Correct. With my time spent reviewing all these annual reports, I'm really looking at it. When was it approved? Are you in operation? And if they're not, I'm making sure it's coming back to your attention to request for a time extension. And this is why, as I mentioned before, you're going to start seeing a lot of these because I want to be compliant with the code.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, please call the roll.
Commissioner Woodard,
Yes.
Commissioner Greenberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Costin,
Yes.
Commissioner Glendenning,
Yes.
Chair Tweet,
Yes.
Commissioner Fikes.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. We have no pending items. Takes us to item J, reports. City Council, Vice Mayor Baisden.
Thank you, Chair Twait. Nothing to bring forward at this time from the council. I appreciate the public's input tonight and the council, or the commission, what you guys did. And we'll take this up, I'm sure, at our next council meeting. Thank you, everybody.
All right, anybody have any questions? All right, we'll move on to Borough Planning, Commissioner Fikes.
Alrighty, we didn't have a whole lot on the planning. We approved a plat administratively, and then we heard a motion for a subdivision in the Bedarkie Creek area, more importantly up in a very rural part of Homer, up on the hillside. And I state that because most of the land and most of the residents in that particular area were on 1 acre or 2 acre parcels, and the argument was that this individual took a 3 acre and they were subdividing it down into 11 lots and developing a cul-de-sac, and so it was going to create a low-density subdivision in a rural area, and so there was a lot of conflict and a lot of discussion on that, but at the end of the day, there was nothing in code that said that they couldn't subdivide their property, and they could not develop it, and they could not have a flag lot. There was nothing really that said that they could do it. So although there was a lot of heartache over it and a lot of testimony about the increased traffic and how they were going to make it work with shared driveways because of the design of it, you have a circle and you divide it up 11 parcels. Everybody on 4 parts of the lot was going to be sharing a driveway, and then it was going to be at a 12% grade, and then you were talking about snow removal and shared responsibility of a driveway. And so at the end of it, there was a lot of discussion, but again, without having anything that wasn't in code to say no, it wasn't allowed, it was ultimately approved. But that was what took up most of the night on Monday, and that was the only thing on the books at the time. So that's all I have.
All right, any questions? All right, item J3, administration, Planning Director Mitchell.
So in your packet, you have a tentative work sessions. I'm giving it to you up front so you can anticipate future work sessions and be prepared to be present, hopefully, and be engaged. And also, I want you to know that there are things that we're going to be working on, and if there's other agenda items that you want to see, I want to plan ahead, because these do take time and research in order to answer any questions you may have as a commission. And I do want to give an update on the CUP annual reports. I know at maybe a month ago's planning commission hearing, I told you there were like over 100. It's because it's based on resolution numbers, and past practice has been when you transfer a CUP, it's a resolution, which should have been an action approval. So I have several resolution that probably belongs to a primary resolution in addition to amendments. So I'm cleaning up the database. It's going to take me a little bit of time because trying to keep track of every time it transfers and which one it belongs to, and then finding that primary. So while it will take time, this will set the department up for success next year. It will be streamlined. And so I can't give you a really concrete number because I'm going through these individually. And I wanted to let you know that the Administrative Assistant 3 position is posted, and it will close next week. So if you know of anyone, or if you want a link to the job posting, I'm happy to forward it, and you can pass it along. And that's all well, one more, sorry. I did talk to the State Historic Preservation Office. Apparently every 4 years, they have a conversation with the planning director to kind of get an update on where the city is at when it comes to historic preservation. Because we're a certified local government, in that means we're eligible for grants. We have certain requirements to be met, and one of it is, as a historic preservation commission, 3 of the commission needs to have background being an architect or a historian, an archaeologist, in order to hold historic preservation meeting as a commission. We haven't fulfilled that in the last 4 years, but I need to demonstrate that I'm making efforts to go to that. So I'll elaborate further in the future, but just to kind of give you an update on where we're at. And that's all I really have for you at this point.
Any questions? Commissioner Glendenning.
Does a history major in college qualify as one of those slots?
Commissioner Glendenning, depends. How long ago?
I wore a younger man's clothes, but I did know how chickens work.
Yeah, you and Genghis Khan probably, huh? Well, maybe we should quiz you on some history here real quick and see how well you do. I knew it. That was going to get me. All right, we're going to move on then. Additional public comments. Feel free to take a shot at Commissioner Glendenning.
Christine Schmidt, 513 Ash Avenue. I just wanted to pass on some information. First of all, RS Zone did used to have all the same restrictions as the other zones, but, and when we moved here, that's the way it was. But sometime later, I believe it was in the 90s, because the original zoning code was from the borough, and then in 84 it got passed to the city. The city decided to take on planning and zoning powers. So when we first moved here in 85, that was, there were restrictions, all the restrictions that RS1 and RS2 had. So basically everywhere you see a C in RS, for the RS zone, that was it would have been an N. But in the 90s, because the borough had blanks instead of Ns, they didn't use Ns, they only had P or C. So in other words, it was either permitted or you had to get a conditional use permit. Everything else was a blank, which meant no. But for some reason, the Planning Commission at the time decided that those blanks weren't an N, they were really a C. So that's where all the Cs came from in our zone. So it's not correct to say that we didn't want those restrictions. We did, and we had them, but until this erroneous, in my opinion, interpretation came along. Number 2, even Wasilla, hardly known as the regulatory capital of Alaska, requires permits for chickens. You either have to get administrative approval or have a permit depending on the level of activity. And so that's why I was lobbying for permits, because at least then we'd know where in our neighborhood or where in our people are keeping chickens, so we can keep an eye on the situation. So I hope that you will consider that if you're allowed to have a work session. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we have well, we do have a little bit of informational items in the back as far as those work sessions go, so, they look good dates to me. I don't know where everybody else falls on that, but hopefully those will work out. Next meeting, February 8th. Anyone, definite not here at that one? Looks, go, Commissioner Greenberg?
I'm not quite sure if I'll be able to make that.
Okay. All right, Commissioners' comments and questions. Commissioner Glendenning?
No, just thank you for your hard work, and, we went at it till we were able to come to a decision, and decisions are good, and it gave us a little wiggle room, and I think these internal discussions amongst ourselves are a positive thing, and we'll improve our craft as time goes by, and thank you to our director for giving us some leadership, and thank everybody for asking the questions, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner Woodard?
I'm good.
Commissioner Costin?
Again, like Jim says, thank you for chairing this group. And I grew up on a farm also, but I kind of knew where chickens came from, so.
I should have researched that before I said it. All right, Commissioner Greenberg?
Yeah, I think we had a pretty good discussion tonight. I think there's a lot of value in a work session, because I think that's where you could have people that are experts at certain things. I think it's difficult for us to come up with recommendations on the fly, because we're not experts and we don't really get to discuss things like the number of chickens that's appropriate for a person to have, or whether it should be a permit versus a allowed use. So these are the type of things that I think are better discussed in a forum where you have people that understand these subjects more than I do, and have the ability to come up with thoughtful solutions, which I don't necessarily have. So I think that's really a good reason to go to have that type of input, So that's just my thoughts.
That's why we have a liaison right here to convey that, I think, next week, so that's good. Commissioner Fikes?
Yeah, I'd share some of those same thoughts, like you say, to try and hash this out on the fly and try and do it all within its parameters, and still try and satisfy all those folks that testified and address their concerns in the time frame. It's just a lot easier. I appreciate the opportunity to take the at ease and try and come up with a solution, even though we're just making a recommendation. But like you say, it's not our proposal, so it just didn't feel like we had that opportunity. So I hope the council heard us and moving forward.
All right. Thank you. And I have nothing more to add, and with all the business complete, the meeting is adjourned.